I guess.
Okay.
What is it?
I hit start.
Okay.
Okay, so I think we're going to give people one more minute, and I believe we're recording.
It's your last chance to leave.
Yep, we're broadcasting live.
No, but now you're on.
You share your screen.
How's that?
I think you have to share your screen in the recording or else it's going to record your face.
I think that's what I did.
No, it's showing your face now.
On the left, on the top,
Uh,
the screen one.
Yep.
Whatever.
That's the screen.
what happened to screen 2? I had screen 2 earlier.
I think if you just share a screen on the top left.
Sure, it's
you're
not gonna show
mirrored
the
now.
presenter screen?
You're mirrored right now.
Oh.
That's fine.
There.
All right, take 2.
Good.
Thank you.
Yeah. Awkward face.
Uh,
I guess I kind of have to stand back there because there's no microphone.
okay, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, I'll get started. Right, you guys hear me if I stand out here, or would you rather I speak into the microphone? Is that better if I'm back? It's better if I'm back here. Is that preference for you guys? I'll end up mumbling if I stand in front of the microphone. Should we?
It's probably better for the recording.
All right, they want to record this. I forgot. No, but how are they getting the audio?
Through here.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. Well, welcome everybody. We're here to talk to you today about what the work that the White House did for supporting the 2014 State of the Union address. My name is Lee Heyman. This is Brian Hirsch, my tech team lead. I am the director of new media technologies at the White House. And what Brian and I do, like what we exist to do, is basically, in short, we build engagement tools. We build the platform that the White House uses to engage with the public, to put the president's message in front of the American people and citizens. So we're going to be talking today sort of about a case study, really, of what we did for this year's event. And like I said, we have this sort of saying that it's our Super Bowl, it's our Kentucky Derby. It's the State of the Union is one of our biggest events of the year in terms of the features we look to produce, in terms of the number of eyes that are on our site. And so what we do is we approach it and we try to, what's really important today, what I'm going to be talking about today, I'm going to start a little bit talking about what our objectives were and how those objectives drove the technology we chose to implement. And then I'm going to kind of hand off to Brian, where he's going to actually go deep into the seeds to talk about deep behind the scenes to talk about the things that we actually did, how we implemented, and I think most important, a value to a lot of the more technical folks in the audience is like the lessons you can take away, not just for event-specific technology, but like how we use these sort of inflection points to leverage and accelerate a posture that values open source, that values reusability, that values maintainability. And so I'm going to talk today really about how we connect that, like the why we did what we did, what the importance is, how we get the value, and Brian's going to talk about the how. So like I said, for State of the Union, one of the most important things we have to do is we set some core strategic objectives for the event. And for this year, we focused on a few things. I'm going to talk probably most of all about sort of a mobile experience. We needed to have a perfect mobile experience. I'm going to talk about why that was so important to us. We knew that a lot of folks are going to be watching through again, back to this mobile experience, but also there's an accessibility component here. Again, I'm going to be talking about why we did this. So a responsive design. So for folks who don't know, thankfully the volume of people who don't know what responsive design is getting smaller and smaller, but I'll repeat anyway. Responsive design is this design philosophy that your overall user experience, the look and feel of engaging with our content, should be consistent no matter what type of device you're viewing it through. It's just we adjust it a little bit based on the size of the portal that you're viewing through, but as far as the overall experience goes, that's meant to change. So we're no longer getting away from this, like you have one experience when you're looking at it on a desktop, and you have one experience when you're looking at it on a tablet, and it's still yet another, like, you know, you've seen those sort of like mobile cards, nav style that we do for a mobile device. These were all really important things to us, and so what the overall objective here was for the experience of watching the State of the Union through our platform to be more of a conversation and less of an audience sitting there consuming. How many folks actually watched the State of the Union this year? Yeah, Washington DC. I asked that question when we were at a conference out in Portland, and the percentage-wise, a much fewer number of hands were raised. How many people actually watched it on whitehouse.gov, watched our live stream? Smaller number, okay. Of the people who had raised their hands initially, when you were watching either on whitehouse.gov or somewhere else, did you have your phone in your hand, or your laptop, or a laptop or a tablet in your lap while you were watching, and you were tweeting and Facebooking and engaging? Okay, cool. So this was a big important component of this. And so one other thing I want to mention about this is that for all the technology you're going to see that we built today, we had 8 weeks to do it. And it sounds a little surprising. In some contexts, it even sounds a little irresponsible, but one of the things that sort of needs to be understood here is how we work at the White House, which is that there's this constant stream of long-term projects and a constant stream of event-driven content, event-driven features and functionality. So we don't, you know, even though we know that State of the Union is coming up, when it's coming up, it's not exactly a surprise each year. It's not like we can sort of put other work on hold, you know, 2, 3, 5 months in advance. We have to keep working. Events keep happening in the world. The president's agenda is not exclusively focused around the State of the Union. So that 8-week time frame is really around the time that the speechwriters start sitting down, sort of putting together the broader framework of the speech. And so any work that we would do too much ahead of that would actually has the potential to be lost work, but more importantly, we would never have the capacity to do it. But what Brian's going to be talking about is, because of that, we know that this is why it pays such dividends that we focus on reuse and open source technology and sustainability. So I want to talk for just a minute about sort of where those objectives came from and why we valued these features that we worked on so highly. So this graph may or may not seem similar to you. I imagine almost someone in every one of your organizations has something like it or something very similar. And this is just a chart that shows the change in mobile traffic over the last 4 years on whitehouse.gov. Everyone in their organization should probably see some very similar lines on their charts here, directions, slope. That's what I was looking for. Seeing, 2010, really not much there. 5% overall, and that's people on not very smartphones at the time. iPhone comes out, we see that growth starting to increase rapidly, massively. iPad comes out in that 2011, 2012 timeframe. That's that narrow band at the top is our tablet traffic starting to come in. So in the course of only 4 years, we've gone from 95% of our people, of our viewers, viewing whitehouse.gov and viewing our live streams through a desktop device or a laptop to only 63% in only 4 years. And that's a compelling enough story as it is to say, hey, of course, no-brainer, we should be investing heavily in the mobile experience. But when we think about this, and especially for folks who are part of providing government services to the American public, to our overall constituency, there's a deeper story here that makes this just so much more compelling for us. Which is when we look at that breakdown of who is that mobile traffic, who are the people who are looking at that? we know on average from a couple of studies, Harvard Business School did one, and I'm going to be quoting most of my material from a Pew study, that 34% of people who own mobile phones use it as their primary, who own smartphones, excuse me, use it as their primary means for accessing the internet. And that previous graph I showed you showed that same thing, 63, 60, 64% right there, 66. But who those people actually are changes when we do look at the demographics of it. And so when we look at minorities, when we look at low income, that number goes as high as 60% in some cases. And when we think about this, especially folks in government agencies and certainly at the White House, let's remember the State of the Union, it's not an address to people who have cable internet and desktop computers. It's an address to the nation. And not everyone in the nation has high-speed internet. Not everyone has cable TV. And this is actually what we are saying is there are core constituencies that are important to us as government agencies that aren't necessarily served by focusing on our desktop. And when we do look at these numbers, it becomes a very, very compelling story for us. That these are some of the most underserved communities that we get benefits from by focusing on the mobile experience. So for folks who did get to watch on State of the Union, historically we have produced for the last 4 or 5 years what we call our enhanced broadcast. This is why we believe there's the value add of coming to watch the State of the Union at the White House. We produce a set of essentially supporting material to go along with the speech, infographics, interesting data points, other quotes, photographs, etc., like that, that essentially, as the president is speaking, on the right-hand side of the screen there, you are seeing, synchronized with his speech, a series of supporting data. And I actually just need to stop for a second and talk about the people who produce that content, because I told you that we, our software engineers, Brian's team, had 8 weeks to produce these features that you're seeing. There's a group of designers who get to see an early draft of the speech 4 days before the speech. Sometimes, if they're lucky, 6. And that draft is literally changing hour by hour over the course of those 4 days. And during the course of the speech, we publish about between 40 and 60 of these graphics and things. They actually produce, over the course of those 4 days, about 130 of these. Because, again, the speech changes. They never know if he's actually going to say the thing that's written in the speech, or if he's going to leave a line out and skip it and move on. Or, you know, they're literally editing the speech in the car as he's driving to the Hill. So all of this content has to be produced. It has to be fact-checked. It has to be spell-checked. It has to be proofread. We have to make sure we have the rights to the images that we're using. And on top of all that, it also has to be done to a standard of design that is expected to go with the White House brand. So we can't just slap these together. And so there's a team of 3 or 4 designers who kiss their families goodbye on a Tuesday morning and say, we'll see you guys in a week and a half. And the work these people do is just remarkable. So given that we put all this effort and energy into that additional content, it became very important to us to find more ways to give people to make that part of the conversation. So what you're seeing here, this is the 2013 State of the Union page. And the thing about these graphics is that they're embedded into the live stream. You can't actually interact with the graphic. And so the White House tweeters, folks running the Twitter accounts, will tweet some of these graphics out, but that's in a separate channel. There's no way to actually interact. If you're watching this online through us and the president's saying something and you see an infographic that you want to tweet out to your friends, you can either go switch over to the White House Twitter feed, try to find it, or you can screen cap this and tweet it out to your friends. But when we do that, we're losing a part of the conversation. We're stepping from one stream into another, or we don't have the ability to do this. So we said, look, this year we're going to do something a little different. So we still have this embed that's timed to go in, because this actually gets pushed out to other partner channels. other channels will pick up our live stream, and we want them to have our infographics too. But we also want to say, if you are watching on whitehouse.gov, we want to have a conversation with you. And so Brian's going to be talking a lot more about this, but this thing that we built at the bottom of the screen here is part of this experience. Now we have this social engagement where we say, here's the same graphic that goes with the thing that the president just said, and here's a button to engage with us on it. And so now you're sending the tweet to your social networks, you're engaging with us, we can actually be part of the conversation with you. And remember now, I said, folks, again, raise your hands if you had your laptop in your tablet while you were watching, right? See, there's a little tab up there on the right, or excuse me, sort of center. It says watching on TV. Click here. So now, if you're already watching it through another channel, instead of having to like look away, we can say here, we'll close out. Don't eat up all your bandwidth on that video stream. You can just get those infographics. You're watching on TV. You're still getting those infographics. They're still in sync with the speech. And the president says something, we can now have a conversation. And now this is all done responsively. So I didn't actually grab the screenshot of it for today, but when you view this on your phone, you're seeing the same thing here. It's just rearranged. The text slides around underneath. The image scales down. The text slides around underneath. Same in the other screen here. It gets narrower, slides underneath, but you're not seeing a different user experience the same way that you engage. And so remember, we had those core objectives for the speech itself that I outlined at the beginning. And so before I hand off to Brian, I want to talk just a little bit about the success that we had with these features. Now, you probably heard a lot about, in the weeks after the speech, how it was one of the, quote, and I say this with air quotes, least watched speeches in a long time. But I put that in air quotes because the actual story is it is one of the least watched speeches on television, right? This was our most watched State of the Union online ever. It was up, in fact, by 40% over just last year, and last year was the highest one before that, and the one before that even higher. Again, we keep going higher and higher. So of those 30 million people fewer watching on TV, 10% of them were not watching on TV because they had switched over to watch our live stream. So it was our most overall, not just on the live streams, but overall the web traffic. It was our highest volume for a State of the Union ever. It was our 8th highest volume day ever. In case you're wondering what the highest one was, it was not surprisingly the live stream speech for Osama bin Laden. We received 90,000 tweets from those infographics. Over 70,000 shares. These were all high watermarks for a single 2.5-hour event, really in the history of whitehouse.gov. And in case folks were wondering what the most tweeted infographic was from the speech, it is this one, and this gives us a handy way to tell, sort of by looking at these tweet numbers, now that we're having this conversation, what part of the speech resonated the loudest with the audience watching online. It's information about the lifetime cost of wage disparity between men and women. So that's what we were able to tell through adding these features, among many other things. So I'm going to hand off to Brian now, and he's going to kind of go behind the scenes for you and talk about how we leveraged open source, how we leveraged usability, and why a focus on those things and focus on building out our ability to do that enabled us to achieve that kind of success in such a short time.
Thanks, Lee. So way behind the scenes. Before we get started here, I'm curious to know in the audience how many people here work for the government. Okay, how many people are developers? A lot. How many people are project managers, product owners? All right, half and half split. Great. So today, 5 years after President Obama's landmark Open Government Directive, more agencies conduct business online than ever before. And a ton of this stuff is powered by open source software, and that's great. But there's more work to do. There's more work to do to make this software reusable. The ideal is that we want to get to a place where we're investing in solutions once, and then we're reusing proven solutions over and over again at a fraction of the cost. So, ideally, we're reusing solutions over and again at a fraction of the cost, not just across federal agencies, but at the state and local level as well. So, I'm going to talk about technical victories that we achieved for the State of the Union, specifically related to achieving reuse. We had big successes with content administrators for WhiteHouse.gov, feeling personally the benefits of achieving reusability with the long page tool that we built to power the SOTU page. We had a big victory where we had an opportunity to reuse a tool that we built for one application, a totally different application, by including it with the tools powering the State of the Union online broadcast. And we also had a big victory with the Tweet Server distro that powered the Twitter tool that Lee was just showing, testing and validating a new workflow that makes it easier for us to build tools for reusability and actually open source those projects so they can be reused by other people, hopefully. So we're really excited to share that with you guys and hope that we can get more people sharing their stuff. So first I'm going to talk about the long page. Drupal gives us lots of tools to make things reusable, right? We can share designs as themes, we can share features as modules, and we can share whole web applications as Drupal distributions. But it's not just about asking our developers to make things into themes, distros, and modules. For our long page tool, which evolved over several iterations last year and was ultimately the tool that we used to build the SOTU page, and is a great example of how this sort of thing works. It takes a lot of engagement from stakeholders, from content administrators, and a really tight feedback loop with developers to actually figure out how to build something that's worth reusing. So here's an example of first long page. This is built by the Office of Digital Strategy. This is the Preventing Gun Violence page. It's like a number of our legacy pages. It's what we call a code in the node page. Code in the node is our term for a page that stores HTML, JavaScript, and CSS alongside content in the database. So one of the problems with these legacy code in the node pages is that they're not reusable. A front-end developer gets enlisted to build one of these things. We put a lot of time and work into it, but then after we're done with this page, we can't reuse it anymore. So the Office of National Drug Control Policy, ONDCP, came to us to prepare for a big report release that they had coming up. I think they gave us about a year of lead time to get the ball rolling on this thing that they wanted to release, and they really liked this long page that we had put together for ODS for the gun policy page. And so we said to them, what if we treat this Preventing Gun Violence page as a static prototype? We build you guys a tool so that rather than having a front-end engineer build it for you, you can actually put something together like this yourself, and then after you've built the tool, you can use it for other things too. So they loved that idea. Here's the drug policy reform page that ONDCP put together for their report release. In contrast to the Preventing Gun Violence page, this was built entirely by ONDCP program staff. So using the long page tool, people who don't know anything about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript can put together a page like this. So as people reuse the long page tool over time, over many iterations for all kinds of things that we never imagined, we constantly had an opportunity to reimagine and iterate and add tools and tweaks and fine-tune it to make it more flexible, add new features. So you can see navigation options. The sidebar sort of drops down to this other spot on the page. New sections, highlights, featured news, new layouts, new styles. So all of this stuff can now be built by content administrators, and last-minute changes can be easily, safely, quickly accommodated by content administrators without any code changes or hotfixes. So by the time the State of the Union came around, we had a lot of infrastructure in place already, and when we decided on the design for the SO2 page, it was going to be another long page with some new styling and a few new sections. And all of this would be tools in our long page toolbox that we can also, reuse for other things in the future. So what we put up on whitehouse.gov/SO2 looked new and felt new, but it was running on field-tested infrastructure that was developed over several iterations, and is a great example of reusability because all of the people who have been leveraging this long page tool over time have gotten more out of it than they put in, because it was built by several different departments for several different uses. So, so that's what it looks like to reuse something internally for our own website, for many departments. But it's about more than this, right? Ideally, we don't just want to reuse things inside whitehouse.gov across many departments. We want to reuse things across applications, or ideally across agencies, right? We want to invest in something once, and when we've got a proven solution, we want to reuse it all over the place. So another great example of this other kind of reuse, where we're using something all the way across applications, is the AWS SQS module. So the State of the Union is the most predictable high-traffic event that we have every year on whitehouse.gov. And so it's a really great opportunity for us to engage with people online. We've got a huge captive audience, and we want to invite people to sign up for our email newsletter. But there's a catch, right? If we provide a form on the /SO2 page, I just heard someone chuckle, I think, anticipating where this is going. If we provide a form on the SO2 page that accepts form submissions directly to Drupal's database, we open ourselves up to the possibility that we're going to receive more submissions than we can handle at once, right? So this could be because of a malicious distributed denial of service attack. This could also be because there's just a crushing amount of legitimate traffic all coming into the website at once while people are watching the State of the Union. And we obviously don't want to crash our website during one of our biggest events of the year. So to handle high volumes and spikes, and I should also say, I guess back into this last slide, we offload, because we know this is one of our biggest events that we can predict during the year, we offload most of our traffic during the State of the Union to our content delivery network. But one thing we can't offload to our CDN is write traffic or form submissions. So what we need is a scalable backend that will accept whatever the world is throwing at it and scale with demand. And we need to be able to let stuff sit in this cloud here in our queuing system, and then wait until so this on the side of this little box is our server that is going into the cloud at a rate that we control and bringing things into our database at a rate that doesn't put our infrastructure at risk. So to solve this problem, we collaborated with Nick Wienhoff on Drupal.org, building on his proof of concept AWS SQS module, which swaps out Drupal 7's default MySQL-based queue system for Amazon's simple queue service. And we rewrote the module using Amazon's latest PHP SDK to get the project to a stable 1.0 release, and incorporated this into the code base of our We the People application last summer. So this is a problem that we were already invested in solving in order to get this Write API out the door that we had been working on for the petitions.whitehouse.gov We the People application, which has huge unpredictable spikes in traffic. So we have the plumbing in place for petitions.whitehouse.gov. We have this need to absorb a large spike in traffic during State of the Union. And for State of the Union, all we had to do, because we had this AWS SQS module ready to go, was snap it into a Drupal 7 site and build a little tool that would give us forms that we can embed in our SO2 pages, our State of the Union pages. And that's how we got our scalable AWS SQS queue backend. So that's what reuse looks like, right? This is our project page on Drupal.org for the AWS SQS module, which now any government agency or any other Drupal user who wants to scale write traffic can download this and snap it into Drupal 7 and have a scalable QE backend. So we've got administrators now. We're excited about reuse, building reusable tools rather than one-off pages. We've got Lee and other department directors who see a great return on their investment when they see us reuse things across applications. But how practical is it really for us to make everything reusable? How many people here have either not released something because someone told them it was going to cost more to take their Drupal work or take some software they were investing in and actually open source it, or had the experience that you tried to open source something and it added overhead to the project? Does anyone have that experience? Okay. All right. I guess everyone's hopefully everyone else is releasing their software and it's seamless. So it is many people's experience that they hear that concern. It is many people's experience, I think, that when they try to open source things that weren't necessarily built for reuse out of the gate, that it doesn't always go fast. So certainly we had that experience with our first Drupal distribution that we open sourced the petitions distro. And so I'm actually going to speed through a couple of slides just so that we can get through some content here. The long story short is we've learned a lot since our first big open source project. So building on lessons learned from our release of the petitions distribution, using this unique opportunity to build a new application from the ground up, following our new standards and processes from square one with the tweet server, we have a really great case study. We have had a really great opportunity to validate some new workflows and prove that we can actually make it a lot easier and a lot faster to open source the work that we're building. So I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about how Tweet Server works, just so you understand how the pieces fit together, and then walk through the 10 things that we did differently in building the Tweet Server for State of the Union. No single one of them is revolutionary, but taken together, the 10 of them add up to a really major difference for us. Okay, so Tweet Server. Lee showed earlier some screenshots of the live event version of the /SOTU page, where we had the slideshow with tweets running throughout the State of the Union at White House. On Twitter is tweeting out quotes from the speech, and some of the tweets are coming out with these infographics, and then we're displaying these as a slideshow on whitehouse.gov as the online broadcast is going. So here's how that worked. We put together a lightweight Drupal 7 distribution called Tweet Server, you can see here. And Tweet Server's job was to monitor Twitter via the REST API to slurp in tweets that were getting tweeted from the White House user account on Twitter, apply our own custom filter to those tweets to check and see if that tweet has an image, has an infographic, or picture associated with it, and then if it does, write that tweet to a static JSON file and push it up to our CDN, Akamai Net Storage, where it's then available for people's browsers for client-side JavaScript to pull the CDN to check for new tweets. And that's how we powered this slideshow. So the Tweet Server distribution was built in 2 weeks. We open sourced the whole thing in a month. And the Tweet Server distro included the Twitter API and net storage modules that we wrote for the project. All that stuff is up on Drupal.org now. So 10 lessons learned from petitions to Tweet Server. Here we go. Lesson number 1, code, comments, and commit messages are all written to Drupal.org coding standards. So screenshots of code comments, and commit messages. So Petitions was developed in private, and the application was live for almost a year before we open sourced it to members of the United Nations and to other members of the Drupal community. So it was written by a number of developers. It included thousands of lines of code, and as a result, when it was time to open source, there was no single person who could say with certainty that there's definitely nothing in here that we don't want to release. So we had to audit it all first. So to be clear, when we're talking about auditing, I'm not just talking about doing a security audit. We're talking about auditing, what if someone left a snarky comment in a code comment or a commit message? One day commit messages are something so esoteric that most people don't even know they exist. The next day this stuff is up on GitHub, right? It can, if there's a snarky comment in a commit message, it can get on Facebook, it can get on Twitter, and that's a major problem potentially. So after we release petitions, we formalized as part of our code review process that code comments, and commit messages all have to follow Drupal.org coding standards. And this is the kind of thing that's really trivial to adhere to along the way. But if you don't do it along the way, it can cause a major administrative burden later when you're trying to release code. Lesson number 2, release early and often. People probably know great reasons for this, so I'm going to skip this slide so for time's sake. Actually, I will share with you these great statistics, though. So just to demonstrate that we're actually doing, practicing what we preach, petitions, these statistics right here show you the number of changes from the first commit message until the last commit before we released. So you can see in petitions we changed 633 files, 35,289 lines of code. In Tweet Server, 17 files and 919 lines of code. So measured by lines of code, we did less than 3% as much work on Tweet Server as we had on petitions before the first public release. So releasing early and often. Code reviews via pull requests. So this is the way that we do code reviews has changed. And before, we used to leave it up to developers to determine when code had been sufficiently reviewed to declare something release ready. And that workflow was error-prone. Even in the best of circumstances, it was really easy to have miscommunication, where someone thinks something is code reviewed when maybe it's not. Sometimes when we've got multiple people working in a single site repository, one person can accidentally clobber another person's work. So the new workflow is this. We have all of our code up on GitHub. The White House has a user account, and the White House's code bases are the canonical versions of our code. And here you can see on the left, you've got the White House D7 multi-project. That's our Tweet Server code base. When a developer wants to do work and contribute to this project, they fork it, so they create a full copy of the project on their own account. So here you can see Mariano Osselborn, user, is copying the project. He'll do work in his own copy, and then when he wants to contribute work back to the project, he sends a pull request. So a pull request is Mariano saying to the White House user account, I want to submit these changes. And these changes can be viewed on GitHub on a screen like this, where it can be peer-reviewed, where it waits to be peer-reviewed by someone else on the team. So here you can see me commenting on some of his changes right before the State of the Union. And with this user interface, it's impossible to accidentally let something come in. It's impossible to accidentally clobber someone's work. It gives us these great tools for commenting on very specific lines of code, which gives us really great ways to give very specific feedback. So this is how we know exactly what changes are being made and prevent any of the confusion that I described earlier. So since we've adopted this workflow, regressions, situations where we accidentally revert something that had previously been fixed, have effectively dropped to 0. So we also can assure that everything is now being written to our coding standards, which I discussed earlier, and that is obviously a big help. Project names. So here's another thing that seems really trivial from the beginning, but saves major headaches down the line and has a major impact on code quality. So this is a practice that's really common out in the wild, where you see inside government agencies, you see inside companies, people write modules and name them my company underscore my module, or my agency underscore my module. And this seems trivial and innocuous, but it can actually make releasing things really complicated. So in our White House code base, at some point, probably for some reason that made sense at the time, someone decided to prefix one of our projects WH underscore something. And nobody follows this pattern on Drupal.org. So people reasonably, I think, assumed that anything prefixed with WH underscore was an internal only project, a project that's not going to be released. And if the project's not going to be released, why not put stuff in there that's White House specific? Might as well, right? So we ended up with this pile of modules that has tightly coupled White House specific code and generic website code. And in order to release any of that stuff, we would have to go through this time-consuming, laborious process of changing all the file names, changing all the function names, and then picking apart the code to, detangle generic and White House specific stuff. So rather than let the perfect be the enemy of the good, 2 years ago we drew a line in the sand and we said anything prefixed with WH underscore is internal only. And we're going to write all of our code as if it's destined for Drupal.org. You need a really good reason to put something in the WH underscore project. So this forces a really helpful architectural conversation. When a pull request comes in, if someone's got something in a WH module, the code reviewer inevitably asks the question, what is White House specific about this? And once in a blue moon, there's a really good reason to make something White House specific. That stuff is like form alters, theme functions, some design work. But in the overwhelming majority of cases, really things that at first blush seem White House specific are just things that should be administrator configurable and can go into generic modules. So for code that gets maintained over a long period of time through redesigns, through new features and functionality and API changes, separating the White House specific or separating the site specific and the generic functionality just makes things a whole lot easier to maintain, and then obviously makes everything contributable. So lesson number 5, require readmes when adding new projects. Even for tiny, simple modules, the first architect or author has to include an overview of the project, what the module does. Nobody likes to stop and do this, but it saves people a lot of time and headache down the road, and it makes things a lot easier to release. The last lessons, 6 through 10, are pretty geeky. So I'm looking at the clock. I think what I'm going to do is suggest that anyone who's interested in the geekier tips, check out a link I can show you from somewhere else. And I think I'm going to wrap up now and open it up for questions. If there's a developer who really wants to know my 5 geekiest tips, we can circle back to them. But so why don't we pause there, and we'd love to hear from you guys and collaborate with you if you're interested in any of our projects. Does anyone have any questions?
Up right there.
Can you make these slides, this slideshow available on the website?
Yeah, we'll put up the slideshow. We'll put up the slides on the conference website. This presentation is being recorded, and there's actually a longer version of this presentation on the DrupalCon Austin website as well. So if you want the 5 geekier tips, you can choose your own adventure, get the alternate ending there.
I'm actually just kind of interested, since you kind of mentioned content managers who are working with it. When you release in your code, do you kind of have a group of people from different teams to kind of use them and see how it works, and you go back to your developers and improve things?
Yeah, we actually have quite a so we use an agile methodology called Kanban, and one of the things that is part of that is like regular, there's just in terms at a project prioritization level, we have basically a twice weekly check-in with the business owners that we're building for, and that includes folks from the content team, designers, people like that. But then as we are developing iteratively, developers essentially get when they feel their work, if they've put together a prototype, and when they feel it's ready to be in a state where it can be reviewed, we'll put together a design review or a user acceptance testing. Sort of a very steady drumbeat of interactions with the designers and the content owners.
Tim?
I have about 5. So.
Yeah.
How many peer reviewers or release managers are there in that process?
Everyone on the team is a code reviewer, so everyone writes code and everyone reviews code. And release managers
to specify, and this is one of the values that we get from the pull request methodology. It's illegal to, no one reviews their own code, right? And what we get from that is a method of enforcing that code that I write has to be reviewed by someone else, and that sort of in the methodology we have ways to essentially flag it and pull it. But yeah.
And anyone submitting requests outside of your developer group, you're not thinking.
We do. That's a great question. We have a whole nother talk we give about the whole how we came to open source the petitions platform. I talk a lot about that. But yeah, I think at this point we've got about maybe how many repos do we have? We have about maybe, let's say, 13, 15 public repos on GitHub, and we don't get a ton of pull requests. A lot of them are like people like finding typos and things like that. But at this point, it's been since our first public repo on GitHub, which was August of 2012. We have a great GIF. It's really cool. We've probably merged. We've probably received maybe 30 or 40 pull requests, and I'd say we've merged in maybe 12 of them, 13.
And we love getting them.
Yeah, send us more. Yeah, that's right. GitHub.com/Lighthouse. And you have this follow-up was how many release managers?
Oh, we over time we work at getting everyone up and running as a release master. So it's really a matter of knowing the code base well enough and knowing our Kanban QA procedures well enough to be sort of an enforcer. So there have been times when it's as few as, I guess, 30% of our team, and there have been times when we're at 100%. Sort of changes with time and projects.
So the framework that you built is like developer and then very close with the open source. Like contribute and perhaps work White House. My question is in the future, do you have any idea of when what will happen to once there's a transition in the administration?
So that's an excellent question. There's a lot of unknowns. This is obviously the first administration. This is where the first administration had. This is really the first time this opportunity has even existed. In terms of the open source engagement, I think I'd like to think we've set enough of a precedent that and it's our expectation that enough of the engineering, that we're not going to see the entire engineering staff walk out the door on January 19th. So we hope that we're certainly going to have set these processes and these rules in place to sort of make it sort of easy to do and actually hard to stop doing. And then with respect to the actual things that we've produced, if you look through our open source projects, a lot of the modules that we've put out there and projects that we've put out there are not sort of administration specific. We'll talk about petitions in a second, but they're tools that any site can use, regardless of whether it's in the public space, private space, what have you. But it's not. There's no so there's really nothing that's we've built that's going to essentially stop having value, even in the case where the White House stops using them. And then the petitions in particular. The website itself goes away. When there's a new administration, they build a new website, they archive the old one, and so the content may go away, but we're hoping that we're actually building essentially a foundation that will be built off of so that the next site for the next president will use a lot of these tools. The petitions platform is a separate beast altogether because that's really become kind of half of our brand there, and that is not intended to be sort of tied to the specific administration. And could the next administration walk in and turn it off? Sure, but we have sort of established its status quo in this organization, and we have now built APIs for it. There's currently a read API that allows you to essentially do really interesting analytics on the sentiments of of petition signers. But we're also in beta right now with the Write API. And what that means is that third parties will be able to, and we're working with partners to get these built where other sites that host their own petitions platforms can actually submit their signatures to our platform. And we think that's really the key to the sustainability of that platform, because it becomes a thing you can't just turn off, because now you've got private sector, and NGOs actually investing their own time and their own resources into building against our platform. It's now a service that we're providing, and that it becomes a lot harder to turn off the spigot. And it's really nice. Yeah, and we have to. That's by law. We have to archive it. We can't. Yeah, that would be cool, wouldn't it?
So I actually think this is a really good opportunity to make a plug for Drupal.org. So when we, as the White House, got involved in GitHub and made that sort of the one-stop shop for all of our open source projects, some Drupal and some not Drupal. We have some apps and things up there. I think the White House wanted to know, well, why should we be on Drupal.org when we're on GitHub? And people from the Drupal community were saying to us, you guys should be on Drupal.org. That's where the community is. So there are actually a lot of benefits we've found since we waded into Drupal.org to actually having a presence there too. So our open source projects that are Drupal projects are not just on GitHub, they're also on Drupal.org. And one of the benefits is actually exactly what you're talking about. So even if someone shut down the White House GitHub account, we're members of an open source project. We've contributed to an open source project. And so, certainly we hope that people in the next White House would love to reuse our solutions and find them useful. But even if they don't, now they're out there. So AWS SQS, totally generic solution for anyone who wants to scale rights with Drupal. Commerce can use it, and the state of Massachusetts, the state of California, government of Canada, any name your government agency, anyone can use it. It's on Drupal.org, and it doesn't actually go away even if we stop participating in it. So please get your stuff on Drupal.org if you've got your project.
Are we 12:15? Or?
I think we're a little over time. Maybe we should take one or two last questions.
We'll take the last question down here.
I used to work at the White House, and our folks are consistently called all these projects TRP, take somewhere to do with our project. It's going on for about 3 projects. All the same activity. How in the world do you get people that culture to use a community convention that actually makes sense?
We call them cores now, is actually what we call the project internally. I actually don't know. It's just not. Our cores don't seem to take that level of yeah, they don't take that level of ownership of the actual projects, naming conventions, things like that. They're there. We have sort of a situation where there's a lot of the tech leadership, the project level leadership is delegated to the technical staff, and the cores are there to make sure we're not breaking any laws, to make sure the bills are getting paid, to sort of to really actually and to be there for us when when money gets spent, and to really help us. In fact, our contract, I didn't get a chance to do this, but our cores and our contracting officers have actually been the biggest asset here, because we are doing a lot of stuff. I even have a whole other deck where we talk about our Agile work and how we've sort of found a way to do Agile development on fixed price contract vehicles, and it's really just an engagement that we have, and we've got some. I work with a core and a contracting officer who put these problems in front of them, and they've said, look, we don't really know how to do this. No one's really ever done this before, but let's pull up a chair and figure it out. And we found ways within the framework of the FAR to achieve what we wanted to achieve. So that's, I guess.
Tell you, I got
yeah. Well.
for filing.
All right.